So one of the biggest battles we have faced during these first 100 days has been the fight over health care. We know that we need to make some changes, but how? How do we get to a health care plan that helps everyone? Let's talk about it. And of course, as usual, ladies, the last segment was so hot that we talked about some things that I want to just go into a little bit, and then we're going to go into healthcare. So Monica, I'm going to ask you this question. So we heard all of the possible areas that there might be budget cuts in. Are we expecting too much from the government to provide these programs? Should we be looking at our churches, our neighborhoods, or our communities? What's happening to that safety net? Speak to that.
I do feel that, for example, since we started talking about Meals on Wheels, in my ignorance, I didn't even know the government funded Meals on Wheels.
Wow. Yeah.
I thought, like the SHARE program, charities, nonprofit organizations were the backbones of Meals on Wheels. So, don't beat me up.
We won't.
I don't think it's a bad idea that the government cut Meals on Wheels.
Okay.
Because I really truly think it should be a community effort. I think that we should be able to donate, we should be able to give money to the churches, and they funneled through this program. Again, in my ignorance, I thought it was a community-based funded program.
Well, it is a community program in that it's volunteers who actually go out. My parents used to do this, years ago when they were alive. They would drive out together. One would drive and the other one would run the meals and talk to the people. So there's a huge community aspect of it. And, the government's money, it's our money, okay? It's our money.
Right.
It's our tax dollars. And we deserve to have our tax dollars be directed at what's important in our communities, and certainly taking care of seniors and other people who need the help.
So true. And again, my ignorance didn't realize that the bulk of their money came from the government. I really thought that, like the SHARE program, it was, I know that Catholic Charities runs the SHARE program. They may get grants. So is that what we're talking about? Is Meals on Wheels, are they being grant funded? Or are they being...
If the federal government reduces or eliminates the amount of money that they give to Meals on Wheels, I believe Meals on Wheels will still exist, but it won't be able to serve as many people. And since, again, it's my tax dollars that are going for that, I would much rather my tax dollars go for that than to bomb a bunch of people.
Oh, totally. We're on the same page there. But we as women organizations, as male organizations, maybe need to give a little more.
I think that none of us would disagree that the community, the nonprofits, the churches, and all of those have a role to play. But when we look at what's happening with our budget, I think it's just unthinkable that this administration would put forth, cutting out that type of program. And I'll tell you one of the things that it really touched a nerve with me, because I think about there are elderly people who cannot they may be in a wheelchair.
That's right.
And I think what people who are privileged, and as we all know, President Trump is quite privileged as a billionaire, people lose sight of the other part of society that should live in dignity. And so when you have programs such as that, which allows these people to also have some degree of dignity, just because you're not able-bodied. There's so many other things. If he wants to drain the swamp, that he can look at.
Start with his own family.
True. And again,
I know you're saying
You don't have to
like
be
it all.
you don't have to be
No.
defensive. I just want to make that point
No, and I
that
agree.
when you're privileged, you don't tend to look at the basic necessities that many people have to rely on to get by, to live a dignified life. And that would also apply to the medical care that so many people didn't even realize that because of what they termed Obamacare, that they're getting this care.
Sure.
So that again is another area that our jobs are to go into the community to help them
Without a doubt.
understand and
Yes.
break it down.
Yes, and again, I didn't even understand the aspect, just never crossed my mind, of the government. So when he said that Meals on, when it was said that Meals on, I thought to myself, well, he doesn't have anything to do with that. The government doesn't have anything to do with that. And so that's where I'm coming from,
Yeah, oh,
in
absolutely.
a sense.
I agree.
You know,
there was a huge outcry on
without
this,
you know,
more than any other issue.
Yes.
On
Yes.
social media.
Yes.
This was the one, and I
Yes.
don't know if it was because we have parents or perhaps.
You're just incredulous that someone could be that mean-spirited.
Maybe so.
But there are a lot of things he proposes to cut. I mean, the environment is something that affects everybody.
Everybody.
And the Chesapeake Bay, he's trying to do things that will make it easier to just let's pollute it.
Yeah.
Why not? It's not important. You know, what is he thinking?
So that's where we're expecting.
You better jump in.
That's where we're
Right.
expecting our Congress people to come in. That's why we elect our officials. We want them to make sure that they stay strong on these issues, the environmental issues. We don't want to go backwards, you know, in terms of pollution, the water, the air, safety features for the food. These government folks are there doing their job. They are trying to do the best they can, but they need the tools to do that job and not go backwards.
And enough employees to do it.
Without a doubt.
And I
Yeah.
think one of the, you talked about healthcare, and that's a great example of how when you collaborate, when your voices unite, you can affect change. Yes. There were congressional representatives on the other side of the aisle, if you're a Democrat, who said that they wanted to replace and repeal. I mean, that is what they've been running on for years and for years and for years. And when they went to their home districts, and in their home districts, people shouted them down and told them, drain the swamp, and I want my health care.
That's right.
They came back and said, guess what? We can't do it.
Can't do it.
And so that's why, the engagement, our engagement is so critical. I think, Ms. Deborah, you mentioned earlier, tying this back to the Women's March even, I think, the idea that women of color, for example, weren't represented in that voice of the feminist movement, and maybe, the word womanist is a better term that people may be familiar with. But I think one thing that I've learned, even in my political science class, freshman year, that our chair of the Women's Commission, Jennifer Jones, I hear her say often is, there's no such things as permanent enemies or permanent friends. It's permanent interests. And when we can understand how we can align interests, then we can see that our needs can get met. Meals on Wheels is getting cut because there's another group that has a louder voice, unfortunately.
That's right.
And there isn't enough money to go around for everything. So we do have to make decisions, and there is a balance around, community nets, safety nets, and nonprofit organizations and faith-based communities. But we do expect and want our government to serve its people.
So let me just ask this. You talked about healthcare for a minute. Do we really believe in this country that everyone deserves healthcare?
I believe
Do we really believe
That's a
that the
basic-
poor needs healthcare? Do we believe?
That's just the
human
basics.
right. It is a basic human right.
It
and I
is.
think that perhaps this is an opportunity to go to single payer. Maybe he
Explain that a little bit.
Well, I mean, instead of, like, right now we have Medicare that helps seniors, right? What if we just expanded that to everyone? That would be single payer. You'd have everybody would be under one system, and the end, like you have in many countries around the world. and it would take out so much of the bureaucracy. It would be cheaper. And it's something that, you know, Democrats, some Democrats, maybe it was the Bernie Sanders type Democrats, have won it. And we weren't able to get it before because Obama did the best he could, and I'm proud of him. And I love the name Obamacare, but he wasn't able to do everything that needed to be done.
Absolutely.
And the Republicans had their heels dug in so strongly that they wouldn't come together and correct the things that needed to be fixed. But maybe this is our opportunity to get what we really want.
I think we have to remember the whole idea of getting health care for this nation was not a new idea. Bill Clinton started that program with his wife Hillary, who had her own incredible task force. My husband was part of that group, but they had some of the best minds all around the country, and they were fought by so many businesses, you know, medical groups, because of, you know, all the money and the things that would be involved in making the various changes. So it was a tough fight. And then when President Obama came in, he had that same fight, but they were able to get it through. And so now I think with the situation the way it is in terms of people digging in, Republican or Democrat, they're going to have to come together to figure out how they're going to work together, because clearly I think that the Republicans were able to see this was not a simple issue that they could push through in a few days when it took years and years for people to evaluate how you get the benefits and what the cost would be. When that Congressional Budget Office put out, you know, what would happen with this, they were able to see some real numbers.
Some real numbers.
And that's just, right. Again, on your point in your question about, you know, whether or not this country, you know, is it a right to have health insurance? And I think that's a really valid question, even to begin with, and sometimes we don't even start there. But as I think about, you know, sort of the capitalist nature of this country and being founded on the idea of you can make it and wealth, your health is your wealth.
That's good.
And where we as women in particular and girls in particular have disparities are in health and in wealth and in income. And those two things, if you look at the data, they're inextricably linked. And so it's so vital. Don't let people convince you that your health care is not important.
Very important.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome.
It is.
So where are the millennials in this?
You know, I think maybe, you know,
and my producer's saying next segment. Okay, fantastic. Don't go away. We'll be right back to the tea room.